Presenting the one and only me, Gonzo the Great. No need to applaud, I'm pre-recording. Welcome to the Jim Henson's Fantastic World audio tour.
Henson debuted Kermit in 1955 on Sam and Friends, a 5-minute program on WRC in Washington, D.C. Back then, Kermit looked a bit like a sock puppet, with 2 ping-pong ball eyes and a body made from the fabric of Jim Henson's mother's old coat. You can see an earlier sketch of him on the wall nearby.
This is a really adorable picture.
Jim Henson's daughter, Cheryl.
I think my father was always intrigued with the idea of inanimate objects having a life. And here is a hose, a regular garden hose, becoming a snake and coming up and rising to his flute playing. And the idea that he could be the Pied Piper of inanimate objects is really quite marvelous.
This furry fellow filling out the doorframe hints at some of Henson's monsters to be. But at this point, in 1955, Henson was still working in 2 dimensions, designing sophisticated one-panel cartoons. This is Tamanella Grinderfall, a.k.a. Tammy. She was one of Henson's first villainesses, created in 1962 for a pilot called Tales of the Tinker Dee.
My dad really enjoyed performing Gosh Posh. He was a really dreadful king. And my father often enjoyed playing characters that were not good at their jobs. I always loved the contrast between the tall, sharp, angular Featherstone and the round, blobby Gosh Posh.
Meet the Frackles. Growl, mutter, snarl, scoff, and gloat. They're the naughty group of bird-like monsters who try to steal Christmas in Jim Henson's 1970 television special, The Great Santa Claus Switch. In this commercial, Wilkins intends to shoot a picture of Wontkins. But when Wontkins says he won't try the coffee, Wilkins shoots him. You can see storyboards for the commercial on the wall nearby.
Ralph the dog is another one of my father's alter egos. Ralph the dog is a very laid-back character. He's very gentle, he's very sweet.
Ralph the dog was the first Super Muppet, the first big Muppet television star. In 1963, he appeared as the hound dog sidekick on The Jimmy Dean Show. Delbert, shown here bearing a couple of fangs and a slightly cross-eyed gaze, was Henson's first life-size puppet.
Zookus is another example of Jim's wordplay. It's a circus and a zoo put together, and I think it sort of characterizes the general atmosphere.
The puppeteers manipulated Big Boss Man with giant bamboo rods.
What would happen is the puppeteer's wearing all black with a black hood over his head, and it's performed against a black stage.
Henson created Dr. Teeth in 1974 in homage to Dr. John, a New Orleans keyboardist and a favorite of Henson's.
Most people think that Mana Mana is a Muppet song. It was actually a song written by Piero Umiliani for a Swedish documentary that Jim most likely saw in the 60s. Jim turned it into something that is so closely identified with the Muppets.
In 1954, Jim Henson enrolled at the University of Maryland. There he made these silkscreen prints called Hilarity, Melancholy, and Conceit. They're striking as much for their beauty as for their sophistication.
We particularly like Conceit, the way that the people are hammering at each other's pedestals, but they're also hammering at their own, and at the end of the day, they're all going to go down. My dad always liked to cut through pretension.
In 1965, Timepiece was nominated for a Short Film Academy Award.
We basically scanned the storyboard images and put them in sequence right next to the footage from the film.
And he got an idea for a sort of multimedia experience nightclub. It was called Cyclia.
This sketch shows Henson's vision for the club's architecture.
And he would have go-go girls in white jumpsuits standing on platforms, and there would be filmed images projected on them.
My father always performed Ernie, and Frank Oz always performed Bert. I think my father always had the more naughty sense of humor, the playful, the practical, joking sense of humor, and that Frank is always a little bit more of Bert.
The King of Eight is a story about a king Everything in this kingdom totals 8. The guards, for instance, by the gate, must always total exactly 8.
My father wanted to create a whole new world. He wanted to do a film where everything in it was different. It was going to take place on a different planet, in a different universe, with a completely different cast of characters. There would be no humans at all, nothing recognizable.
That film was The Dark Crystal, and these are props, costumes, and stills from the movie. Released in 1982, it told a dark but ultimately redemptive story of a world divided by feuding species, the Mystics and the Skeksis. In Fraggle Rock, different species had to learn how to live together. Gobo, the character on the left, was the leader of the Fraggles. On the right is Cantus, the singing minstrel. Jim Henson performed Cantus. Fraggle Rock ran from 1983 to 1987, and Jim Henson described it as the happiest show he ever worked on. Just a few years later, in 1990, Jim Henson died. He was only 53 years old. What Henson left behind was the gift of his imagination, a world of characters and artistic innovations that redefined the word classic.
My father's death was a tremendous loss, but as long as this work is out there, available for people to see, then he lives on. And there's something really beautiful about that.